Mega Man 2. Have you ever played Mega Man 2 or any of the classic Mega Man games on the NES? To me, this game feels like home. I recall getting a copy and falling in love with the game, learning every single way to beat every single boss. So much trial and error, and most importantly, discovery to be had. After learning the game inside and out, I hungered for more, and I ended up picking up Mega Man 1, and then later 3 when it was released. Eventually, I played through all the classic NES games, and even more recently, Mega Man 9 and 10 were released in the style of the NES games. I even enjoyed the departure from the 8-bit games with Mega Man 11, and while 11 was fun, after finishing it, I haven't had the desire to go back to it, so I'm waiting for a new Mega Man game to come out. This is where Trophy comes in. I heard rumblings about a new NES platformer in the style of Mega Man being developed, and every so often I would check up on it because of course I want to try anything that has been made by a passionate fan of the game I have so many fond memories of. Not only was Trophy supposed to be a run-and-gun action platformer, but it was being developed by Gradual Games, who put out the excellent original NES title called The Legends of Owlia, which I live-streamed the game in its entirety on this channel. Eventually, and seemingly out of nowhere, a KickStarter campaign showed up for Trophy in my Twitter feed, which I was excited to see, so I set up a reminder. Not long after that, a representative for Trophy contacted me about sending a review ROM to give my thoughts on. As you probably already know, if you watch this channel, I am a big fan of Homebrew NES games, so of course I jumped on the opportunity to give it a go. Popping it in, I was greeted with a title screen and some pretty jamming music. Now, it is my understanding from the information Gradual Games sent along, is the full complete game will have some additional cinema scenes used to build up the story. It's a shame they aren't here now because I love this kind of thing, but we're here for the gameplay, not the story, right? So let's see how this thing handles, shall we? Oh, and side note, I love how they put my name, Dan B, on the title screen of this game. From the start, you can pick from 8 different stages in any order. The circus, the mines, the forest, the quarry, the asteroid, the warehouse, the train, and the tundra. Very similar in style to a Mega Man game, only with a simpler twist on the GUI. But that's not the only similarity. The way your character controls is right out of classic Mega Man. So right away the game feels very familiar, and you're placed into the mindset that you are in for a classic Mega Man experience. But here's the thing to remember. This isn't Mega Man. I know it's a love letter to the series, but there are just enough differences in the gameplay that you will have to unlearn what you have learned. For instance, there are instant death spikes in several levels. Now maybe it's just me, but the hitbox here is very unforgiving. Plus, you can't use a damage boost to avoid death, which I happen to use often in Mega Man games. But I digress. This is Trophy, not Mega Man. The sprites and animations are colorful and well done. In fact, this game has some of the biggest and most beautiful end-level bosses you have ever seen in a game made for the NES. The enemies all have that robot vibe, whether it's based on an animal or a trash can or whatever. It fits the game and the level you find them in. The titular character named Trophy reminds me a little of Fugitoid from TMNT. Yeah, that's a deep cut, but I know some of you know who I'm talking about. Anyway, his animation's pretty smooth, and I dig the way he looks, even if this ladder climbing animation looks a bit silly. I also wanted to mention this hand really quick. What do you think it's doing here? Alright, get your mind out of the gutter. It's a thumbs up to indicate you've beaten this level. Come on. The level design and Trophy is really nice. There are your occasional parts where you'll have to play the level several times to learn the layout, especially in the areas where you have to free fall and hope you won't land on spikes. But I feel this is much more an homage to this kind of game rather than bad level design. In fact, I quite like it, because not only do you learn the ins and outs, but it starts to become a game within itself on how efficiently you can get through certain death traps. The music is pretty rockin' too. I particularly enjoy the ocean stage music. The boss battle music also keeps things pretty intense as well. Speaking of the boss battles, this is where a big departure from the Mega Man games comes in. Sure, the bosses are kind of like fighting a Dr. Wily boss, but at the end of each regular stage, rather than in the Dr. Wily levels. Most of them have a pretty simple pattern, and once you figure out how to do it, the game becomes more of a test of patience. I'm not sure how many bullets these guys take, but it feels like hundreds. You receive no power-ups for defeating any of them, so you're always armed with your regular pea shooter. There are a few power-ups in the game I found, but these are more like secrets than traditional power-ups. One is a heart, which gives your life meter a little boost. The other is this hand doing that hand thing again. However, this hand holds the power to make your shots bigger and transforms you from Bumblebee into Goldbug.
look at this new paint job. I've gone beyond being just plain old Bumblebee. I'm a gold bug.
That you are, Bumblebee. So from now on, that's exactly who you'll be. Gold Bug.
You go from silver trophy to a gold trophy. At first, I didn't think the powered up shot did anything. It's not stronger than the normal shot. It still takes 3 shots to defeat most enemies. Where it does come in handy is in certain boss fights. Since this shot is wider, you can actually hit certain enemies' weak spots where your normal blaster couldn't reach by jumping. Which, by the way, the weak spot is always the eye. While I was playing this game, I kept joking to myself, calling the game, "Shoot him in the eye!" Because that's where you shoot every boss. In the eye. So the challenge in this game varies a lot. Sometimes it's super easy, where you can just stick to the high road and avoid most of the enemies. And sometimes it seems like they throw a ton of enemies at you, and you're just a magnet for damage. Speaking of magnets, you have this magnet boss, who for the life of me, I can't figure out its pattern. Sometimes you think you have it, but then other times it randomly drops on you and you're screwed. But then you have bosses like this clown, who once you figure out how to do it, you just do it until the deed is done. One nice feature of the game is it uses a password system. I never actually used the password system because I wanted to learn and beat the game without easy access so I can give it a fair review. However, I did notice during my gameplay, before I really got to know the levels, I would get fatigued and I would need to take breaks. Plus it's a fairly short password input, which is always a good thing in my book. Really, my only gripes with the features in this game is there's no way to see how many lives you have left, except when you select a stage. It would have been nice to include this in the pause screen or something like that. By the time I got to the end of the game, I was really worn down. You see, once you beat all 8 stages, a final 9th level is unlocked. This is basically a combination of enemies from various stages to come before it. It's set up in a way you'll have to go through the stage at least a few times just to understand how to get to the final boss with enough lives to figure out how to beat it. This boss is super frustrating. But again, it's all about learning the patterns and having patience to execute strategy to win. Even knowing what I needed to do didn't stop frustration from setting in. I'm usually a very chill person, but I found myself getting angry and even cursing at the game. Now maybe those feelings are coming out due to circumstances beyond anything in the game. I don't know what those could be, but they certainly were getting released here. So I did what anyone might do. I quit. And yeah, it sucked to give up and let anger get the best of me. It was only a matter of time until I came back though, and this time, with a vengeance. Bound and determined, I did a no-death run through all 8 stages and made it to the final boss of the game, only to be killed over and over. But in doing this, I started to recognize the patterns, and before you knew it, I was able to defeat it. I stood up and I screamed another curse word, only this time it was a victorious exclamation. After beating it, I watched several people stream the game just to see how well they were faring, and I learned something. I'd see them complain about the difficulty or how unfair some of the bosses are, just as I did. And yet, when they finally defeat the enemy at hand,
oh man, I did it!
They all light up with victory. And that's the real spirit of this game, a sense of accomplishment. When you play this and win,
Yeah!
you feel that joy in being able to pull off what seemed like a very difficult task in the past. Which is how Gradual Games must feel about this title, because they've definitely accomplished something good here. So is Trophy going to replace the Mega Man series as my gaming equivalent of comfort food? Well, no. That's not to say it's not a good game in its own right. It's fun, and it delivers a decent challenge, and if you're a fan of the Mega Man series, you will want to give this one a go for sure. With that said, thank you for watching. You can find links in the description for the various things discussed in this video. As always, you can help out by dropping a like, commenting, sharing this with your friends, and subscribing. If you have any ideas for what you'd like to see next, write those too. And with that, see you soon!